I'll never forget the way she looked at me that night. Chin lifted a little too high, eyes too steady, like somebody who had already rehearsed her lines in the mirror. "I slept with him once," she said. "It was a mistake. A moment. It didn't mean anything. A clean cut, one and done, that's what she was selling." And maybe she thought if she said it calmly enough, I'd swallow it and nod like a polite fool. But all I could hear was the sound of his car engine from the night before, the way it idled on the street outside our house long after midnight. That wasn't a moment. That was a routine. I didn't say anything right away. Silence is underrated. People think it means shock or weakness. It doesn't. Silence is a mirror. They end up confessing to their own reflection. She kept talking, explaining, justifying, smoothing the edges of a story that didn't deserve smoothing. I watched her hands. They shook every time she said the word once. And the more she repeated it, the more I could feel something old in me cracking. Trust, maybe. Or hope. Hard to tell the difference these days. The truth is, the whole thing started a week earlier. I'd come home early from a job that ran smoother than expected. It was close to midnight, cold, the kind of night when even the streetlights looked tired. I parked down the block because I didn't want to wake her with the garage door. As I walked toward the house, I saw a car parked 2 spots ahead of mine. A silver sedan. Windows fogged from the inside. Engine still warm. I didn't think much of it at first. Our neighborhood has visitors all the time. But then I saw him, her coworker, slipping out of the driver's seat and heading toward the path that leads behind our house. No hesitation. Like he'd done it before. I didn't go inside right away. I stood there in the dark, listening. People talk about a sixth sense like it's some mystical thing. It's not. It's just knowing the person you share a bed with well enough to notice when something doesn't fit. Her smile had been off for weeks. Stretched too thin, always slightly late to arrive. Her phone face down more often than usual. Her late-night brainstorming sessions becoming more frequent, more vague. I chalked it up to end-of-year stress. Holidays, deadlines, life piling up on her shoulders. But seeing him walk behind the house, that put everything in place like snapping the last piece of a puzzle. When I finally went inside, she was already in bed pretending to be asleep. I watched her breathe, slow and steady, like someone who knew she'd erased all her tracks. But people like that always forget the small things. The scent of cologne that didn't belong to me, the faint indent in the mattress, the bathroom light left on. Little details that become loud when you're paying attention. The next morning, I didn't confront her. No yelling, no questions. I just kissed her forehead, told her I'd be home late, and installed a small camera in the hallway before I left. A cheap one, nothing fancy. Motion activated, easy to hide behind the coat rack. She'd never notice. People only notice cameras when they're innocent. And now, here she was, days later, standing in our kitchen under the soft glow of the pendant lamp, selling me the once story like it was on clearance. She thought she was being brave, thought this was her noble moment, a one-time slip, an emotional lapse. She didn't know that 2 nights in a row, I'd watched him walk through our hallway on my phone screen. Didn't know he made himself comfortable in our home like he paid rent. Didn't know her once had timestamps, angles, and a clear full-color picture. Once, I finally said, calm, too calm. She blinked fast 3 times in a row. Her tell. She always blinked like that when she lied. Yes, she breathed. I'm being honest with you. I want to fix this. She didn't know honesty was already sitting quietly in my phone, waiting for its turn to talk. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. New ones every day. For the next few days, the house felt like a stage where only one of us knew the script. She moved around me carefully, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping dog. Gentle voice, extra touches, long hugs she hadn't given me in months. Guilt has a smell to it. Sweet, desperate, like someone trying to cover rot with perfume. Every time she brushed past me, I could feel the apology she wasn't brave enough to say and the lie she wasn't strong enough to stop repeating. It only happened once. The line hung between us like a cheap curtain, Thin enough for me to see through but thick enough for her to hide behind. I didn't challenge it. I didn't ask her anything. I didn't even look at her for too long. I let her stew in silence because silence is where the truth breaks apart on its own. On Monday night, I sat in the living room pretending to watch TV. She sat at the dining table behind me with her laptop open, pretending to work. Every few minutes I could feel her looking over at me, waiting to see if I'd crack or explode or ask something. I didn't. Instead, I replayed the footage I'd saved from the hallway camera. The first night was bad enough, seeing them walk in with the quiet confidence of people who believed the world owed them privacy. The second night was worse. He came in earlier. He took off his jacket like he was used to hanging it on our hooks. And she greeted him like someone who had been waiting for hours, not minutes. Nothing on the footage was explicit. They stayed out of the camera's full view. But their voices, their shadows, the timing, it was enough. Enough to prove a pattern. Enough to shatter the word once, forever. I paused the video every time she laughed at something he whispered. I remembered that laugh. It used to be mine. When we were younger, poorer, freer. She laughed like that at my dumb jokes, my ridiculous optimism, my ability to make her feel chosen even when life was beating me senseless. Somewhere along the line, that laugh stopped belonging to me. Somewhere along the line, I became background noise in my own house. On Tuesday morning, she made breakfast, eggs, toast, fruit, the kind of breakfast she used to reserve for good days or apologies. She moved around the kitchen fast, humming lightly. When she placed the plate in front of me, her hand brushed mine, and she held it a second too long. "We're okay, right?" she asked. I lifted my coffee, took a quiet sip, and nodded. "We're fine." The truth was, my mind was already working through the next steps. Saving the footage, backing it up, checking state laws on surveillance recordings. I'm not stupid. I wasn't about to lose the house, the savings, or my dignity because she wanted to relive her 20s with some guy who still wore office ID badges on weekends. I needed documentation, dates, times, not emotion. Emotion was what got me hurt in the first place. Later that day, while she was at work, I sat at my desk and thought about what our marriage had been. Not the good times, those are easy to romanticize. I thought about the quiet cracks, the subtle changes, the things you only notice in hindsight. The way she started dressing nicer for team lunches. The sudden inside jokes with coworkers whose names she never mentioned at home. The weekends when she needed space to recharge. I remembered how I used to chalk it up to burnout or seasonal blues. But the truth was simpler. She'd left the relationship long before she physically left the house. People don't cheat when they're happy. They cheat when they're already gone and too cowardly to say the words. By Wednesday, she had a new strategy. Overcompensation. She came home early with takeout from my favorite place. She cleaned the house. She suggested we reconnect. I played along without giving her anything. Every kindness she offered felt like a brick she was stacking to build her alibi. She didn't know I already had the blueprint of her betrayal saved on 3 separate drives, labeled discreetly. She didn't know I'd spoken to someone discreetly at a law firm, asking hypothetical questions about no-fault divorce, marital asset protection, and admissible evidence. I kept my voice calm, my tone neutral, my face unreadable. That night, lying in bed, I listened to her breathe again. Slow, heavy, but not peaceful. She was restless, shifting, sighing, turning. Secrets make a bed feel smaller. She turned toward me once, her fingers brushing my arm. "I love you," she whispered, soft, hesitant. I didn't say it back, not because I didn't feel anything. Feelings were the problem, but because the word love needs truth behind it to be worth saying. And we were miles away from truth. Instead, I closed my eyes and pictured the screenshot of his car outside our house. The timestamp, the way the cold air fogged their breath as they walked inside. I remembered the camera catching them whispering and moving just out of frame like dancers avoiding a spotlight. And I knew the moment was coming. The moment when I would stop pretending. The moment when silence would become action. She thought she was rebuilding us quietly. She didn't know I was dismantling the marriage brick by brick, calmly, carefully, making sure every piece of evidence was lined up in a row. She didn't know that the calmest men are usually the ones preparing for the storm. By Thursday, something in her shifted. I could feel it the moment she walked through the door. She hesitated in the entryway, keys in hand, staring at me like she was trying to read a language she used to speak fluently but suddenly forgot. "You're quiet," she said softly. "More than usual." I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the email I wasn't really reading. "Long week," I said. It wasn't a lie. It had been the longest week of my marriage. She walked past me, her perfume trailing behind her, familiar yet suddenly foreign. She lingered in the kitchen, leaning on the counter, watching me from the corner of her eye. She looked scared, but not of losing me. Scared of losing control of the story she'd crafted. Guilt never terrified her. Uncertainty did. And for the first time, she couldn't predict where my silence was heading. That night during dinner, she reached for my hand across the table. I didn't pull away. I didn't give in either. My hand stayed still, like it belonged to someone else. "Talk to me," she whispered. "Please." I almost laughed at the irony. Talk to her? She had spent months not talking to me. Only crafting excuses, editing the truth like a bad scriptwriter, telling half-stories that led nowhere honest. Now suddenly she wanted conversation. "What do you want me to say?" I asked evenly. She swallowed, eyes glossy. "Just something." The problem was every something inside me was a truth she wasn't ready to hear. After dinner, she offered to watch a movie together, like it was a date night we'd forgotten. I said sure. I sat beside her, let her lean her head on my shoulder, felt the weight of her trying to claim a closeness she'd already given away to someone else. My phone buzzed once, an alert from the hallway camera. She didn't move. She didn't even notice. I didn't open it. Not because I didn't want to know, because I already knew. He wasn't there. Not tonight. Not since she confessed her once. She had cut him off the second she sensed danger. Cowards always run when they realize someone might be watching. But the camera picked up something else. Something I hadn't expected. She had spent the afternoon pacing the hallway, stopping in front of the coat rack, running her fingers along the jackets, right where the camera was hidden. Like she felt something watching her. Like she sensed a crack in her narrative she couldn't explain. She stood there for a long time, lost in thought, then walked away. Her instincts were finally waking up. Too late. When she fell asleep on the couch, I slipped upstairs and opened the saved footage again. I watched each clip carefully, taking notes. Times, dates, shadows on the wall, muffled voices. I wrote everything down, neutral, factual. I wasn't building a revenge plan. I was building a case. A clean one. A quiet one. The kind that leaves no room for theatrics or screaming matches. I learned a long time ago that the most powerful blows are the ones delivered without raising your voice. On Friday morning, she woke before me, which almost never happened. I heard the coffee machine, the clink of dishes, and her slow footsteps as she approached the bedroom. She stopped in the doorway. "We need to talk this weekend," she said. "Really talk." And I could hear what she meant beneath the words. She wanted to confess more. She wanted to reshape the truth again, soften it, negotiate it. She wanted a controlled confession, something she could manage emotionally, something that still allowed her to save face. She wanted to tell me a little more before I found too much. But honesty given out in measured teaspoons isn't honesty. It's strategy. When I didn't respond, she added, "I want us to work." That one made me pause. Not because it moved me, because it sounded practiced, like she'd rehearsed it in her car before walking in. "Okay," I said finally. "We'll talk." She looked relieved, but she didn't know talking meant something different to me. My kind of talk involved timestamps and footage and the cold clarity of documented lies. Later that afternoon, while she was at the salon preparing for a work dinner, I drove to a small legal office 2 towns over. Discreet. No big signs. Just a plain building with frosted windows and a receptionist who didn't ask unnecessary questions. I met with an attorney, older guy, silver tie clip, straightforward. I laid out the situation hypothetically at first. "If someone suspects repeated infidelity," I said, And they have recordings confirming it. What can they do to protect themselves financially? He asked a few simple questions. I had simple answers. He gave me the framework. Documentation matters, timelines matter, calm matters. Judges respect calm. He didn't need to tell me that twice. When I left the office, something inside me steadied. Not hardened, just settled. Like a bone resetting after a long break. It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when someone shows you exactly who they are. Repeatedly documented, timestamped. That evening, she came home glowing from her salon visit, hair curled, makeup soft, wearing the dress she saved for nights when she wanted attention. "Do you want to come with me?" she asked, adjusting an earring. "It's just a work dinner." I studied her for a moment. This woman, this familiar stranger, trying so hard to pretend normalcy while standing on a lie so fragile it could crack beneath her own heels. "No," I said. "Go ahead." She smiled, relieved again, thinking I was loosening up, trusting her. She didn't know trust wasn't even part of the equation anymore. When the door closed behind her, I opened my laptop, arranged the files in order, created a clean folder titled simply, December, Documentation. I labeled each clip. I saved copies to external drives. I reviewed my notes. Everything was ready. All that was left was timing, and timing, I knew, could change everything. She thought she was stepping out for one peaceful night before our big talk. She didn't know that the talk was already written, the evidence already in place, and the ending already chosen. The calmest moment in a storm is right before it hits, and she had no idea how close it was. She didn't come home from the work dinner until almost midnight. I heard the car door, the click of her heels on the driveway, the soft fumbling at the lock. She entered quietly, as if ashamed of waking me, except I wasn't asleep. I sat in the dim living room, the TV off, the only light coming from the lamp beside me. She jumped when she saw me, pressing a hand to her chest. "You scared me," she whispered. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I shrugged. "Just thinking and waiting." She hung her coat, hesitated, then walked over and sat at the opposite end of the couch, legs tucked beneath her, like she used to when she wanted closeness without admitting she needed it. "Do you want to talk now?" she asked. Her voice was small, controlled, prepared. She'd rehearsed something, probably a half-confession, a softened truth shaped to sound survivable. I turned my head slightly, studying her face, the subtle tension around her eyes, the way she kept licking her lips like she was stalling. "Not tonight," I said. "You're tired." Her shoulders dropped in relief. She didn't want to talk. Not really. She wanted to postpone the explosion she sensed coming. "Tomorrow then?" she asked. I nodded. "Tomorrow." She fell asleep fast that night, maybe relieved she'd bought a little more time. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. Not the betrayal, the logistics, the sequence, the plan. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying to end something that was already dead without letting it rot any further. By dawn, she rolled over and curled against me instinctively, like muscle memory trying to bridge a canyon. I didn't pull away. I didn't move toward her either. I stayed still, a placeholder for the closeness she'd already broken. Saturday morning, she woke early again. She made breakfast, pancakes this time, her peace-offering meal. She danced around the kitchen lightly, as if pretending that normalcy could be cooked back into existence. When she placed a plate in front of me, she said, Let's spend today together. No phones. No distractions." I nodded slowly. "Sure." She brightened instantly, hope sparking behind her eyes. That hope made me feel something I hadn't expected. Sadness. Not for her and not for us. For the years we'd wasted pretending the wrong things were fixable. We went for a walk that afternoon. The cold air was sharp enough to sting the lungs, and she tucked her hand into my arm, leaning into me like a woman in love. People passing by probably thought we were fine, maybe even happy. Funny how easy it is to look intact when the cracks are on the inside. She talked about winter plans, about decorating for the holidays, about maybe taking a short trip in January to reconnect. I listened quietly, letting her build a future for us like a house made of paper. Every word she spoke was another window placed, another wall, another roof tile. And I knew every piece of it would collapse the moment I opened the folder labeled December. Documentation. That evening, after dinner, she poured us both a glass of wine. She sat facing me at the table, her foot brushing mine under the surface. "Okay," she said, exhaling deeply. "Let's talk." I set my glass down. "You go first." She froze for a moment, just a moment, but I caught it. She had a plan, a script. She started with the safest version of the truth. "What I told you the other night about what happened, I wasn't entirely honest." My silence forced her to go on. "It wasn't just once," she admitted softly. "It was twice, and it was stupid, and I ended it. Twice." That was her big confession. I let the words settle between us like dust. She looked at me hopefully, like a child expecting praise for telling half the truth. "I should have told you sooner," she added. "I'm sorry." I leaned back slowly, studying her. "Twice." She nodded, eyes shining, gripping her wine glass like a lifeline. "Yes, and it won't happen again." I nodded once. "Okay." She blinked. "Okay." I looked her straight in the eye. "Okay. Thank you for telling me." She looked confused. She expected anger, questions, bargaining. But calm? Calm terrified her. Calm meant something was coming. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter. I took the folder I had prepared earlier, printed screenshots, still frames, timestamps. I placed it on the table in front of her. She stared at it like it might bite. "What's this?" she whispered. "Documentation," I said simply. She opened it slowly. The first page was a photo of his car outside our house. 3 different nights, 3 different angles. Her hand flew to her mouth. The second page was a still frame of the hallway camera, the 2 of them stepping inside. The third page was a timeline. She flipped through the pages faster, her breathing growing shallow, her shoulders shaking. You recorded me?" she stammered. "I documented my home," I corrected gently. "And who you brought into it." She pushed the folder away as if it burned. "This looks worse than it is," she whispered. The desperation cracked through her voice. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't every night." I raised an eyebrow. "How many nights then?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for an exit, but there wasn't one. Not anymore. After a long silence, she finally whispered the question she'd been afraid to ask all week. What happens now?" I sat down across from her, calm as ever. "Now," I said quietly, "I want you to read one more thing." I reached into the folder and pulled out the papers clipped to the last page. I slid them across the table. Her face went white as she realized what they were. Divorce documents. Clean, straightforward, already drafted. She touched them with trembling fingers, then pulled her hand back like they bit her. You're divorcing me?" she breathed. I nodded. "Yes." She covered her mouth, shaking her head in disbelief. "But I thought we were working on things." "You were working on the version of the story that made you feel better," I said softly. "I was working on the truth." She began to cry. Quiet at first, then louder, messy, frantic. But there was nothing in the tears that changed anything. They were the tears of someone losing control, not someone losing love. That I didn't raise my voice. I didn't touch her. I didn't argue. I just sat there, steady as a stone, watching the truth land on her shoulders. Tomorrow morning at breakfast, I would ask her to sign the papers. Tonight, I just watched the person I thought I knew finally meet the consequences she had earned. She didn't sleep that night. I could hear her in the hallway, pacing barefoot across the hardwood, stopping every few minutes near the kitchen table where the folder still lay. She kept coming back to it like she expected the papers to rearrange themselves into something less devastating. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of someone realizing her lies had finally run out of room. Around 3 in the morning, She slipped into the bedroom and sat at the edge of the mattress. I felt the weight shift. She didn't speak, didn't touch me, didn't dare try to climb under the covers beside me. She just sat there, small and afraid. For the first time in months, maybe years, she was the one who couldn't sleep while I was the one resting in clarity. Betrayal eats the betrayer from the inside long before it reaches the one who was betrayed. When morning came, she was already in the kitchen, moving slowly, mechanically, making breakfast like she was performing a ritual she barely remembered. The smell of coffee filled the house. Bacon sizzled. She was trying to create normalcy, but everything about her looked wrong. Her eyes swollen, her shoulders slumped, her movements stiff. Guilt had aged her overnight. I walked in quietly and sat at the table. She placed a plate in front of me without a word. Her hands shook so much the fork rattled against the ceramic. She sat down across from me, eyes on the table, tapping her thumb nervously against the wood. After a long moment, she whispered, "Can we talk?" I cut a piece of toast and nodded. "We can talk after breakfast." Her eyes flicked up at me, confused. After, she was expecting an emotional showdown at dawn, the dramatic scene she had seen in movies. But real life is calmer, colder, quieter, and that frightened her far more. We ate mostly in silence. The quiet between us wasn't tense. It was definitive, final. She kept studying my face, searching for softness, for hesitation, for something she could use to bargain with. But there was nothing. The part of me that had loved her wasn't angry. It was simply done. And done is a language even liars understand. When the plates were empty, I reached for the folder and set it on the table one more time. Her breath hitched, but she didn't look away. This time there was no denial in her eyes, no scrambling to adjust the story, just resignation. She clasped her hands together tightly, squeezing until her knuckles went white. "You're really going through with this?" she whispered. Not a question, a realization. I nodded. "Yes." She swallowed hard. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy. I'll quit my job. I'll block him. I raised a hand gently. "Stop." She froze. I leaned forward, voice calm, even. "You're not offering to fix the marriage. You're offering to fix the consequences." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she understood that nothing she said would steer me away from the decision I had made with a clear mind. Still, she tried one last time. "They always do. Don't end us like this," she whispered. "Don't just walk away." I met her eyes, steady. "I'm not walking away. You walked away months ago. I'm just following the path you paved." Her face crumpled. She covered her mouth as a sob escaped. But there was nothing to do with her sadness. It wasn't a rope to pull me back. It wasn't a reason to stay. It was just noise. She pushed the folder toward herself slowly. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. When the pen touched the paper, she hesitated, her breath shaking. "Please," she whispered, almost to herself. "Don't make me do this." I didn't respond. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and signed. One page, another, and another. Each signature sounded like a soft thud against the table, the sound of a life closing quietly. When she finished, she placed the pen down with trembling fingers and pressed her palms flat on the documents, as if she could take something back by touching them. But she couldn't. I gathered the papers calmly, slid them into the folder, and stood. She stayed seated, staring ahead, motionless. "What happens now?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Now," I said, "we handle the rest like adults." She nodded slowly, tears falling silently. She didn't ask me to stay. She knew it wouldn't matter. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She knew she hadn't earned it. She didn't ask for one more chance. Even she knew there were no chances left. I walked into our bedroom, grabbed the small overnight bag I'd packed the night before, and headed for the door. When she realized I was leaving right then, her chair scraped the floor as she stood abruptly. "Wait," she choked out. But I didn't stop. I opened the door. The cold morning air poured in. She stood behind me, arms wrapped around herself, shaking. "Please," she whispered. Say something before you go. I turned slightly, not enough to face her, just enough for her to see the outline of my profile. I did, I said softly. I listened. Then I stepped outside. She took one step toward the doorway, as if instinct told her to follow, but she didn't cross the threshold. She stayed inside the house where her lies had lived. I closed the door behind me gently. No slamming, no dramatics, just quiet finality as I walked to my car. The sun rose over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the street. The same street where his car had sat for days. The same street where I'd stood in the cold realizing my marriage was already over. I opened the car door, placed the folder on the passenger seat, and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. Tasted like clarity, like freedom, like the first breath after being underwater for too long. When I looked back at the house one last time, I didn't feel anger or regret, just closure. Life doesn't end when someone betrays you. It begins when you stop betraying yourself by staying. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe for daily new ones.